Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in this afternoon. We're so happy to see you here on a beautiful, sunny day today. And we're super excited because we have a very special guest that we're introducing today, and he's going to be speaking for us. He is a Stanford graduate. He's a Harvard Medical School graduate, a Mayo Clinic graduate. He has his own national concierge practice as an integrative, very highly sought after integrative medicine doctor, and he's served over 10,000 patients thus far, as far as I understand. And a little unknown fact to me that I just found out, he actually has a theater background. How cool is that? Little extra tidbit there. And we're very excited to hear his perspective on molecular hydrogen, oxidation, antioxidants, and brain health today. So without further ado, I am very happy to welcome Dr. Michael Turner.
Well, hello everyone, live and in person. Glad to be here. I'll just spend a minute introducing myself, and then we'll jump right into today's topic. As you can see, we're going to talk about oxidation, antioxidants, and your brain in particular, right? So these are some common phrases. We hear the phrase oxidation or oxidative stress. We hear the phrase antioxidants. But my goal today is to really bring that concept home, perhaps in a way that has never been presented to you before, to help you understand it. And the more you understand it, the more you will value being healthy, and the more you'll value the antioxidants that you can get in your diet or through molecular hydrogen, as an example. A bit about myself. I'm an integrated medicine doctor, meaning I combine my training in traditional medicine with longstanding personal interests in health and wellness. A lot of that was just me growing up in California, kind of had a healthy lifestyle. My mom pretty much didn't let me have sugar and junky cereal and didn't let me play video games and stuff like that, which, you know, I kind of disliked at the time, but in retrospect turned out to be very healthy. So I combine my health interests and my medical training. I try to help people live their best lives, essentially be as healthy as possible. I was also a school teacher for several years, and so I take pains to explain things when I'm talking to a patient. A lot of what I'm trying to do is help them understand the situation in the same way that I understand it, because my thought is, if you could understand your problem like I do, then you would be as motivated and as capable of solving the problem. And so I'm trying to, explain things always in the best way. So this presentation, understanding oxidation, antioxidants, and your brain, very much enjoyed putting it together. It kind of reminded me of being a school teacher all over again. So I'm looking forward to this. And also, I want it to be a little bit interactive, right? This is not going to be me just up here doing this for an hour or something like that. That's not fun. So I want you guys to get ready, because you're going to talk to each other, and I'm going to ask you guys questions, and we're going to take a break about halfway through to talk, field some questions, things like that, okay? But the first thing is to get comfortable with a neighbor, at least close enough to talk, because I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to have to talk to your neighbor and answer respectively, okay? So warm up to do that, but we'll get right into it. So here's our first question. You got to talk with your neighbor. Why must you breathe to stay alive? Okay, find a neighbor. Let's do this. Sterling, go. Why must you breathe to stay alive? All right, I love it. Great. This is great. I love it. You guys off to a good start. You're all warmed up. Kid got another 10 minutes, which is cool. I love it. So somebody want to share an answer that came out of your group, to the question, why must you breathe to stay alive? Cal?
We need oxygen.
Sure, absolutely. All right, so in case that didn't pick up on the mic, she said we need oxygen to stay alive. The Bible talks about God breathing the breath of life into us, and clearly, yes, we need air, we need that oxygen on a moment-by-moment basis to stay alive. Exactly. So let's dive into that a little bit. We know that oxygen is necessary. It's that oxygen intake that you have to have on a moment by moment basis. Also, by the way, you have to get rid of something on a moment by moment basis too, right? Which is carbon dioxide. So that's the flip side of that. We've got to be exhaling and offloading that carbon dioxide and taking up the oxygen. Fair enough. So now here's our next question. What does your body do with that oxygen, right? So I breathe, get a big burst of oxygen. We know it hits my lungs. We know it goes in the bloodstream. And then what? Where does it go and what does it do? Okay, ask your neighbor. Talk it over for a little bit if you have any ideas. All right. Good. I love it. I love it. All right. What does your body do with the oxygen? Key concept is this bonfire behind me, right? I picked this graphic for a reason. Okay. So there's a bonfire going on inside your cell. In fact, there's thousands of them. And these bonfires take place inside your cell in a little segregated area because, you know, a bonfire is potentially dangerous, right? It's got a lot of heat, it's got a lot of flames, a lot of action. So your cell walls off and has a special area where it stokes its bonfire to create energy for you. And it has thousands of these little areas, even in one cell, which that's pretty remarkable considering how small a cell is, right? Let's just ask the question, how small is a cell? Put it this way, one of the largest cells, is an egg, a woman's egg. It's so large that it's visible by the naked eye. You don't need a telescope to see it. Okay? An egg is the size of a period at the end of a sentence. We can see a period that's the size of an egg. Now, that's still kind of fairly small, right? And considering that that's one of the largest cells in the human body. So go down from there, we're talking things smaller than the size of a period. And within that cell, we're talking thousands of smaller little areas where the bonfires are happening. All right. The areas where the bonfires are happening are called the mitochondria. You've heard that phrase. All right, and we're going to talk about that a little further. So basically, what does your body do with the oxygen? Something along the lines of it uses it to create energy, right? That's the idea. That's sort of the gist of the answer. So what's happening in this picture? Let's look at this. Oxygen is violently reacting with the wood and destroying it. Fair enough? We have a release of energy. Huge amount of energy gets released. We have byproducts. We have embers. We have sparks. We have ashes, right? This isn't a perfectly clean process. There are sparks flying off of this thing. There are parts of it that aren't fully burned, you know, even when the fire's done. Right? And we also have danger here because we have delicate nearby structures, right? We've got this tree, you know, in the background. Let's start with that. This is actually a football pep rally at a college. Okay, so we probably got a dorm, you know, back there, and of course we have 1,000, you know, 18 and 19-year-olds, perhaps, you know, not in with a lot of alcohol on board, and who knows what else. So, you know, not always being cautious, but we got them ringed off here, try to keep them safe from this bonfire. So we've got potential danger around with some delicate structures and people. Okay. And then, of course, you're going to have fire extinguishers. You're going to have some basis for fire safety here, right? In case something sparks off, you know, an ember kind of flies, crackles, and pops and spreads out somewhere. You with me? Now, if you can understand everything we just mentioned in this bonfire, then you can understand oxidative stress. Okay? You can. So now you understand oxidative stress. Oxygen violently reacting with something to release energy. Okay? The something that oxygen violently reacts with is basically a molecule of carb or a molecule of fat. Those are the things your body burns for energy. Think of it like a log, right? Here comes the log of a carb molecule or the log of a fat molecule. Your body could burn proteins if it needed to, but it tries not to do that, right? Protein is just too important. It's part of your bones, part of your muscles, obviously. It's essential for your skeletal structure. So unless you are literally starving to death, your body's not going to burn protein. But it will burn either a molecule of carb or a molecule of fat, all right? And you're taking it inside your cells, and essentially the oxygen is violently reacting in a summary way think of it that way, to tear up this molecule of carb or this molecule of fat and release energy. That is called oxidation. We have byproducts, the embers, the sparks, the ashes. What are these byproducts called? Free radicals. These things get loose. It's not a clean process, right? We have danger. We got delicate nearby structures in our cell. What are those? The cell membrane, the DNA, or certain enzymes. The cell membrane is the three-dimensional structure that defines the cell, right? You can think of it like, a huge three-dimensional bubble, right? There's an edge to your cell. What defines it? It's the cell membrane. And it's fluid. This thing's moving around and shifting, okay, kind of like this. Needless to say, if your cell membrane is damaged, it can possibly cave in and cause the collapse of the whole cell, right? If you have big holes opening up in your cell membrane, things are going to rush in there that don't belong. The pH will change, the osmotic pressure, et cetera, and your cell's not going to live long. So integrity of the cell membrane is vital. We also have DNA inside your cell. Those are the instructions for everything that the cell would need to do, right? So let's say your calf muscle cell, right? Your calf muscle cell needs to, let's say, create some new muscle fibers because you walked a lot yesterday and you tore some fibers in your calf muscle and you need to regenerate those, right? So how does it do that? It goes down into the inside of the cell where the instructions are to make any given part that the cell would need. And the instructions are the DNA. So it opens up the instructions and it looks and it scans those instructions and then it builds whatever it needs. Okay. And then it sends that thing out into circulation to do its job. And then it kind of like folds up the instruction book, AKA the DNA strand. It opens it up and then it folds it up, puts it away for safekeeping. The DNA, that's the master code. If you think of it like a computer system or something, that's your master code. You don't want errors accumulating in there, right? Because next time the cell opens that thing up to make something, it can't do it. There's an error. Or it makes something that's malformed. You with me? So the DNA is vital territory. You want it opened up and closed and kept for safekeeping. You don't want embers and sparks getting in there and chemically reacting and burning up your DNA or damaging it, essentially. You with me? So those are some of the key structures inside your cell that are dealt with. Okay, and then we have fire extinguishers, right? What are the fire extinguishers in the cell that try to keep this contained? Any ember sparks out, somebody rushes over, hits it with a fire extinguisher, keeps it from getting loose in the crowd, keeps it from lighting the tree on fire behind it, right? What's the cell using as a fire extinguisher when the process isn't perfectly clean, burning, and possibly dangerous? Correct. Those are your antioxidants. All right? Give a high five to your neighbor if you're on the right track. Good job. Exactly. Nice. Fist bump. All right. Love it. All right. Next. Okay. Here's another example of oxidation in common experience. Rust. Okay. That is an example of oxidation. Oxygen in the air is violently reacting with the surface metal there and tearing it apart and doing that. Okay. I just grabbed this quote. This was from a construction materials science website. But anyway, it said, any material made with iron that is exposed to both oxygen and water will rust. Right? You guys know that? Any material made with iron that is exposed to both oxygen and water will rust. Right? Do we have anything made with iron in our body? Lots of it. Yep. Lots of our enzymes have iron as a part of them. Our red blood cells in particular have iron as a part of them, which is why if you lack iron, you get anemic, right? And the job of iron is to bind an oxygen molecule and carry it around. And so if you lack iron, you get anemic, you lack energy, you get fatigue. So we absolutely have iron in our bodies. It's essential. Women's prenatal vitamins have extra amounts of iron because it's so important for the developing baby, as an example. All right. So we've got iron in our bodies. Do we have oxygen in our bodies? Of course. Do we have water in there? Of course. So conceptually, on the inside, could we have rust happening? Correct. Yep. Unless we're doing something about it. Yes. Right? Not a great concept, obviously. All right. Here's another example of oxidation. Wrinkles or sunspots. Okay, that's a visible example of oxidation. Again, like a rusting concept, oxygen has broken down some of the integrity of the collagen fibers and some of the cells in the soft tissue. All right. And as that kind of starts to break down, you get sunspots or All right. Where and how exactly does oxygen create energy? Right? Now, I kind of hinted at this already. I said we got these couple thousand little segregated areas where our bonfire is going on. And so I kind of gave you the answer. That's the mitochondria. Okay, great. Go ahead. So where's the mitochondria? And yep, how many mitochondria are in a typical cell? Why don't you tell your neighbor if you want to guess? Let's say we did a calf muscle biopsy and we looked at that thing under a microscope and I stained it and I wanted to count how many mitochondria. How many mitochondria might I find in your calf muscle? 5, 10, a million? What number are we talking about? Tell your neighbor. Inside one cell, what's a typical number of mitochondria? All right. Anyone want to throw out a number?
6,000.
6,000. All right. All right. Good. Yeah. So one. Yeah. No, definitely not one. Yeah. So it's about 1,000 to 2,500. Okay. Yep. In a typical cell. Yep. Yep. About 1,000, couple thousand. Let's just imagine. Now, a brain cell, as we'll talk about later, has much more than that, and it's an object of investigation still in understanding how many mitochondria a brain cell actually has. If you look it up online, you'll find some widely varying estimates, but it's definitely a lot more than that. But typical cell, let's just say in the body, that's a decent estimation. Okay, so that's where the oxygen goes. Its destination is the mitochondria. We got several thousand of them. These mitochondria are little segregated spaces where chemical bonfires are happening that use oxygen, and the oxygen destroys something, a molecule carb or a molecule fat, and it releases energy, and we capture the energy. We're all together on that? Okay, let's just talk about how for a second. We're going to geek out a little bit and just zoom in, okay, like telescopic lens to actually inside the mitochondria, kind of in the sense of chemistry, if you're interested, to drill down a little bit on how the oxygen does that and what's happening. And that gets into this thing right here. Does anyone recognize this diagram at all? Okay, this is called the electron transport chain. This is a pretty famous concept in chemistry and biochemistry. This is essentially an outline of the chemical processes that allow you to be alive every second. Getting back to, we need oxygen every second to stay alive because of this right here. This is the zoomed in view on why we need oxygen every second to stay alive. What is the oxygen actually doing? I'll draw your attention to this part right here. This is where oxygen comes into this diagram, right here. And what happens is your molecule of carb or your molecule of fat, I'm going to switch to the other side of the picture now. Your molecule of carb or fat comes in this side. Okay? And some chemical reactions happen, and your molecule of carb or fat has the hydrogens torn off of it. Okay? And there's energy in that. There's energy stored as we strip the hydrogens off this molecule of carb or fat. Ultimately, we got the hydrogen molecule or atom at least, and we're carrying that thing around, and there's energy in there. So here comes this little guy right here, and he's donating a hydrogen. He's giving up his hydrogen. You can see some hydrogens floating around with me. So we've torn the hydrogens off the molecule carb or fat. We're kicking them into this little area here. And to be very precise, the atom of hydrogen has 1 proton and 1 electron. Just think of it like this. It's the simplest possible atom, right? We've torn this thing off of our food molecule. Now we got hydrogen sitting here. And then in this area right here, we separate them. We actually tear the proton and tear the electron apart. Okay? The proton goes up to this zone, and the electron stays right here. All right? Now, this electron then is bouncing around and flowing down and going somewhere. All right? You with me? Yeah. The hydrogen, the proton that got torn off of it, is also floating down and going somewhere. But I want to focus on that electron that got torn off because it's going down here and it's going somewhere, and that electron is ultimately combining with what? What do you see here? Oxygen, okay? A little oxygen molecule sitting there. Yep. So I want you to think of this like there's a stream that ran over its barriers on the side. We got a flood situation, okay? The stream is broken through, it's breached, and now we've got the brigade of people with sandbags showing up on the scene. You with me? That's what we're talking about here. So we got a bucket brigade, so to speak, but we got the sandbags out. Okay. So On this side, we have a couple big, strong people taking the sandbags off the truck and then passing them along. The hydrogen kicks up here and this electron gets passed along, right? And we got 3 people. This is actually 3 people in this little sandbag brigade. So we pass this electron over here to this guy. Okay. And then we got a guy coming up with a wheelbarrow, right? That's the end destination. We got to throw the sandbag in the wheelbarrow. This guy scurries off and he goes and puts it up in the dike or wherever we need to shore up. You with me? Now, we got a brigade of sandbags getting passed down here. If the guy with the wheelbarrow isn't here to accept it, this whole process stops, right? This backlogs. Does that make sense? We can sit here, we can unload trucks till the cows come home. If there's nobody with a wheelbarrow at the end to go distribute and do anything, it's like the whole thing grinds to a halt. We're just sitting here. Oxygen is that wheelbarrow. It's the thing that comes along at the end to keep accepting what's getting pushed down the line here so the system can keep running. Okay? So that oxygen molecule comes right in here. It accepts the electrons that we give it. It whisks them off. More electrons flow down. Over here, we throw these electrons off to the oxygen, whisk them off, and we got the process running. If there's no oxygen, this whole thing grinds to a halt, and no more energy gets produced, and you would go unconscious, and then you would be brain dead in 5 minutes. So this is happening all the time in every cell, right? In thousands of locations. Think of it like being next to some high voltage wires at a power station, a transforming station, and you hear that hum. You ever heard that hum? Yeah. Right? It's like, it's this hum. I want you to think of this as like this hum. This is the hum of life. It's going on in all your cells all day, 24/7. If it ever stopped, you would die. It's just humming. You go to sleep, doesn't matter. Still got to hum. Got to get that energy out.
I find that sleep nice.
Pretty amazing, right? You know, let's just think of sleep apnea. What's that, right? Sleep apnea is all of a sudden, I can't get enough oxygen in, usually because of the structure of my throat, right? And it's like, if I can't get enough oxygen, my brain will panic and I will startle and I will gasp or turn over or something. So even when you're unconscious asleep, your brain knows how to get oxygen and give commands to your body to keep the oxygen coming because we got to run this thing, no days off, no seconds off. You with me? That's what we got here. This thing's got to run. And so oxygen comes here at the end. And so the phrase in chemistry we say would be that oxygen is the terminal electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. Okay, that's the precise, geeky, zoomed in definition of why we need oxygen, because we need it to accept electrons at the end of this electron transport chain, or the whole little brigade stops and we're not getting energy creation. You guys all with me on that? Okay, love it. Let's go on. Let's zoom in just a little bit further on that, slightly, all right? Because here comes hydrogen. See that? Hello. So our oxygen molecule floats around to this side and is ready to accept some electrons that we're going to give it. Okay. Essentially what's happening is you breathe this in. This is how oxygen looks like when you breathe it in. You got 2 oxygen atoms glommed together to form molecular oxygen. This thing's floating around in your blood, gets delivered into the cell, floats down inside the cell, shows up on the scene, ready to do its job. And what ends up happening is, first of all, something kind of violent. You tear these 2 things apart. So now you have 2 unstable oxygen atoms sitting there. Why are we tearing them apart? Well, because ultimately we're going to recombine them with a hydrogen atom and we're going to get this, right? So just looking at the shapes of the little circles, you can see that this has got to get torn apart, this has got to get torn apart, and then we're recombining stuff. You with me? And as we do that, a bunch of energy shoots out of this process. That's the beauty of this. We're not just rearranging things at the same energy state. We're rearranging them with a big burst and release of energy as we do so.
That release.
Not quite. I'll tell you where the free radical comes in. Yeah. So I want you to think of a violent process. You're tearing apart a comfortable oxygen molecule now, and you've got 2 pieces that are highly reactive and unstable. They might just glom back onto each other real quick because that's how they're comfortable. Okay. Or in a perfect world, if we tear them apart, we quickly give them a hydrogen, 2 hydrogens each. Whoop, come on, and then it's stable again chemically. All right. All right. But this process isn't perfect. Okay, this process, this is oxygen showing up, accepting an electron, accepting a proton. You know, it gets this little hydrogen added back onto it here at the end. But this process at the end of this bucket brigade of electron flow, it's not perfect. For example, what if you tear this apart and you recombine it, but this thing only has one hydrogen with it. It's only got 1 year. Okay, this looks like, let's say it's just got 1 year hanging on, right? That thing's unstable. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to have another hydrogen molecule over here, or atom, you know, what's the deal? Okay, that becomes unstable at that point. What if you tore the oxygens apart and then they came back together, but they came back together with an extra electron, for example. They got something extra sticking on them, hanging off of them. Right. So then things are unbalanced. So if it's not bound just kind of nicely like this or like this, it's sort of unbalanced and then it's reactive, and that is an antioxidant at that point. Or excuse me, that is a reactive oxygen species or a free radical at that point. That's what that is. That's a free radical. If that oxygen molecule isn't in a stable configuration, all by itself or combined with another one that's got some extra pieces or only one hydrogen or something like that, if it gets unstable, that is a free radical. Okay, so this process isn't perfect. We just talked about that. Free radicals, aka reactive oxygen species. Okay. Just to show a little diagram, we're talking like this. Here's our nice, comfortable oxygen. All right. Here's an oxygen that only has one hydrogen on it. It didn't get the memo. It didn't quite combine cleanly. Okay. It didn't pick up its other hydrogen. And so now it's got this little extra red dot hanging out here. You see this red dot? Okay. That would represent an unpaired electron in the phrase of chemistry, which is unstable. Or here's comfortable oxygen. We tore it apart. It recombined and then somehow picked up 2 extra electrons in the process. Now we have 2 unstable electrons hanging off the edge of this thing. Okay. You can see here, this is a variation on that. We tore apart the oxygen molecule, but in the process of reconfiguring down in there, it didn't reconfigure quite perfectly. We got the 2 oxygens came back, but now we have 1 extra electron hanging off the side. So this is a very negative concept because these unpaired electrons, chemically speaking, are going to go react with something to become paired up, which is the most stable form. Okay? This is why in the cartoon diagram here, it says free radicals. A free radical has an unpaired electron. It's only got 1 and it has space for 1 more, and it's not comfortable till it fills that space in. So it goes and snatches it from somewhere. Okay? So those free radicals are going to go snatch it from, your DNA, a molecule of your DNA, poof, tear a piece of hydrogen off of that. Oh, they'll go over to your cell membrane, tear a couple hydrogen atoms off, suck them up. Right? Now we're damaging and tearing up the cell. Okay? So an unpaired electron is unstable and it is reactive. This unpaired electron and this little guy, this free radical, is going to go grab it from somewhere else. And in doing that, this thing, the structure of this thing is destroyed slowly. Make sense? Okay. Now, antioxidants are helpful. They donate electrons. That's the definition of them on a chemical basis. The antioxidants donate electrons. The metaphor we use was a fire extinguisher, right? Which is exactly, very helpful concept. Chemically speaking, exactly what they do is donate electrons. So if this is the free radical and it wants to go tear up your DNA and grab a electron off of it, the antioxidant comes along and says, look, I got an extra one, hold on. Okay, and it gives one to this guy so he doesn't have to go do that. With me? So it's cartoonish, but it's actually very helpful. This is literally what's going on in the chemistry. If you didn't have antioxidants, you'd have a bunch of free radicals tearing up parts of your cell to get that little extra electron. When you have antioxidants, they have an electron to donate. They sort of calm down the situation or they quench the free radical. Making some sense? All right, love it. You guys are a great audience. So let's talk about some common antioxidants. You guys have heard of vitamin C, of course, super famous. It's an antioxidant. Vitamin E, also an antioxidant. How about this next one? This is less known, but super important for your body. Okay, most people don't know this one, but it's probably almost one of the top 2 most important antioxidants in your body. It's called glutathione. Have you ever heard of glutathione? Interesting. You should read about that. And if you read, you can read about ways to boost glutathione. That's a key idea. You want more glutathione in your life. Okay. It is one of the most important antioxidants inside your cell. Now, one way you can get glutathione, quick tip, is you can take a supplement called NAC. This is actually a supplement. You can buy this on Amazon, tonight. I take some every day. I don't fail. NAC stands for N-acetylcysteine. You don't have to know the exact name of it, but the point is you take NAC and this thing creates glutathione in your body. You might think, well, why not just take glutathione directly, right? Why don't they sell glutathione directly? They do, but it's not well absorbed. It's broken down typically in the GI tract, all right? So it's just not great. Whereas NAC is well absorbed. It's not broken down. And NAC travels freely throughout your whole body. And as soon as it gets wherever it needs to go, it chemically reacts and it boosts up the glutathione levels, okay? This is phenomenal. Here's a quick, just a visual image and a concept, right? If you're looking for some antioxidants, the idea is brightly colored fruits and vegetables, okay? In a word, brightly colored fruits and vegetables. The color actually indicates its antioxidant status, right? So the more brightly pigmented, the more healthy it is, the more antioxidant content it will have. So if you think about the difference between, let's say, a potato and an eggplant, right? Or blackberries and celery. Okay, you get my drift? Mm-hmm. So that's your quick and dirty, concept for getting antioxidants in your life are brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Now, molecular hydrogen, also an antioxidant. Also an antioxidant. And let's look at that. And you guys will understand why now. You're going to understand exactly why. It's not complicated. Everything we talked about already tells you why this is an antioxidant. So here's our molecular hydrogen right here. Okay, 2 hydrogen atoms bound together. They each have one little proton in the middle. They each have one little electron on the edge. And remember, a single unpaired electron is unstable. It doesn't like to do that. So hence, these 2 molecules or 2 atoms hook up together to form molecular hydrogen. And now they're sharing these 2 electrons and they're paired. And so this is a stable configuration. You with me? If you want to think about stable and unstable in terms of chemistry, just think of the idea of a magnet. It's kind of like that, right? You got the positive and the negative side of a magnet, boom, that gloms together, that's stable. You got positive and positive, it's just unstable. It won't go, right? Did you ever play with magnets as a kid and try to push 2 positives together? It's kind of interesting, right? It just kind of like worms apart. It just doesn't do it. It flips over and then it gloms on it. Think of that in your mind. It's the same idea in chemistry. So these electrons like to be paired up and glomming together. So molecular hydrogen comes in looking like this. Well, just look at this structure for a second. This is kind of cool. If a reactive oxygen species, aka a free radical, is missing an electron, you can see that if you broke this hydrogen molecule apart, it's got 1 to donate right here and 1 to donate right here. So this could potentially quench 2 free radicals. You with me? If you tear this molecular hydrogen apart, you've got this hydrogen atom that can come in here just like this and give up its electron to get in a stable configuration with this thing. Okay? So 1 molecular hydrogen, if we can manage to divide it up like that in our cells, which happens, now we have 2 hydrogen atoms sitting there, which if they can find the right free radical, they can glom onto that and calm it down. Bottom line, that's it. So that's how molecular hydrogen functions as an antioxidant. It breaks up into 2 atoms, and then each one has its 1 electron, and it goes and it looks, and any oxygen that's floating around that's got an unstable electron hanging off of it, it combines with it. And as it combines, it ends up creating water, essentially, in a perfect combination. As we saw, that's the ratio. All right, so there we go. That's how molecular hydrogen works as an antioxidant. Here's what's interesting. There are several articles about this, and I'm fairly new to the idea of molecular hydrogen as an antioxidant, probably within the last 4 or 5 months. It wasn't really on my radar screen before. I was traditionally, knowledgeable about vitamin C, vitamin E, glutathione, fruits and veggies, all that stuff. But molecular hydrogen turns out has a strong scientific basis and understanding for why it is an antioxidant. As an example, I looked this up quickly on Google, not hard to find. Molecular hydrogen, a therapeutic antioxidant and beyond. Okay. Here's a quote. The therapeutic effect of molecular hydrogen, H2, has been demonstrated in the central nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the lung, the kidney, the liver, the pancreas, skin, remember we talked about skin, eyes, bones, and reproductive system. Okay, that's pretty striking. So molecular hydrogen can effectively work as an antioxidant and get into all those systems and do its little antioxidant protecting job. Okay, pretty striking. Let's stop there for a second and take any questions, all right? Or this is like our one big break here in the presentation. And then afterward, we're going to talk about the brain, but just generally questions on anything discussed here so far. Happy to talk it up.
Does the mitochondria, does that have anything with being brain dead? The reason I'm asking that question, but I could say this, our president had these tests and they didn't find any mitochondria. I'm just wondering if that has anything to do with being brain dead.
Yeah, well, the definition of brain dead would be electrical activity ceases in the brain, right? And the reason electrical activity would cease would be because your brain no longer has the oxygen, the energy, or the energy creating ability to keep up the electrical firing. So now we can ask the question, why might your brain not have enough capacity to keep up its electrical output, right? And one answer would be if your mitochondria died off, sure, because that's where this is all created. So if you had no mitochondria, that cell will die, whether it's a brain cell or any other cell. If your mitochondria, it doesn't really ever get down to zero, but let's just say it declined below a critical level. If your mitochondrial number falls below a critical level, that cell doesn't have enough energy for life. Again, you're thinking of this hum in the background. Zzz, we got to run the machine. If the hum drops off, zzz, that cell's like curtains, is done. All right. So, yeah.
Well, the other question is, we have two lungs,
Yeah.
an upper and lower lobe. Could you explain to us exactly what the functioning is of those two capacities? What does the lower lobe do and what does the upper lobe do? What does it take care of here?
Good question. I'll just repeat it for the audience. He said we have two lobes in our lungs, upper lobe and lower lobe. Why might there be that difference? Does one have a different job than the other? To the best of my knowledge, they don't have a different job. Okay, they're both involved in bringing in oxygen, getting rid of carbon dioxide. Okay, same exact difference. I think the reason we have an upper and lower is just, let's say, a byproduct of the way the lung is unfolding as you're developing, right? It's almost like as your feet are developing, 5 toes pop out, right? The toes don't necessarily have a bunch of different functions. Their job is to stabilize you and, be there and give you some sensation. But in the way that you're developing three-dimensionally, boom, 5 of them pop out. Well, in the way that your lung's developing, boom, we got a couple lobes. But they're essentially doing the same thing, okay, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not a pulmonary doctor exactly, so maybe there's more sophisticated answer out there, but that's always what I've. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Well, let's carry on then. Let's talk about the brain in particular, okay? Great question. We're going to zone in on the brain here. So why is the brain vulnerable? Why is the brain vulnerable? It's pretty vulnerable. Okay, why is it vulnerable? I want to talk about that. Concept of brain death, for example, right? Your brain's vulnerable. First concept is that it has high energy demands with possibly millions of mitochondria. Okay, millions versus 1,000 to 2,500, as I said before. It's possible the brain's got up to millions. Again, as I was reading through the science on it, it seemed a little bit of an ongoing question. So it's not well established, but it's possible it's cranked all the way up to millions. So your brain is vulnerable because it has really high energy demands. If it doesn't get its high energy demands, cells start powering down. Okay. Let's understand the brain a little bit. I want to give you an image and a metaphor that will help you understand the brain, probably a little different than you ever thought about it before. Most people think about it in a way that's not exactly accurate. So I want to give you a really accurate way to think about it. First of all, let's understand that it's 200 billion interconnected cells. Everybody say 200 billion. All right. How many people on Earth, roughly?
About 700. Yeah.
Right, like 7-8 billion, I think, the current population of Earth, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so that's 200 billion. So I mean, if you think of every single human being on Earth being a nerve cell, that would get you to maybe 7 or 8. This is beyond that. This is times 10. That gets you to 80. Still beyond that, double that. Now we're at 160, almost there. Okay, so a lot of nerve cells in there. They're all connected. They're connecting up. And they're alive. Everybody say alive. This is the key idea that most people, they kind of intuitively know this, but they don't really grasp what that means. That's a very powerful concept. Most people, if I ask you what's your brain like, they think of a computer and they think of a chip in there, right? this chip's got prongs and it's got a circuit board and this other thing's got prongs and the electricity flies around and this little prong talks to this thing and it's just like circuit board stuck in there. You with me? That's not correct. That's not great. Because your brain, these cells, these 200 billion nerves are alive. They grow, they move, they die. They sprout new little pieces of themselves. They're in action. Okay, so a better image would be like octopus. I want you to think of an octopus. An octopus is sitting there. It's got tentacles, maybe 8, 9, 10 tentacles, and that thing's moving around, right? That octopus is reaching out, touching its environment. I want you to think about an octopus laid on top of an octopus with another octopus next to it. And it's just like one big gigantic pile of octopi sitting all near proximity to each other. Those are the nerves in your brain. These things reach out, they're touching. They're holding on to other nerves or they're letting them go. Okay? To further illustrate that idea, let me give you 2 examples. Let's say you meet someone for the first time. You see their face and then they tell you their name. Hi, my name is John. This is an oversimplification, but bear with me, all right? Let's say you have one nerve whose job is to remember the face. So you've got the image that's kind of downloaded to this one nerve right here. You with me? And then you've got the name, John, downloaded to this other nerve over here, because that's an auditory stimulus, which is different than a visual stimulus. You with me? So now we got one visual nerve talking to one auditory nerve to remember that when you see this guy's face, that his name is John. You with me? Now, what happens if you walk away, you come back and you see John's face and you forget? It's like you're blanking on that name. What happened? Well, you got told and the cells briefly made a connection, but that connection didn't get reinforced. And so bloop, the little octopus reached out for a second and then they popped their little tentacles off and they're back isolated. So now you see his face, you're like, what's his name? Right? Because this thing's not connected up, right? Or you hear his voice, he's like, hi, this is John. And you're like, what's he look like? Right? Because the image and his name, the word, are not connected up in your brain. How do we strengthen a connection between these nerves in our brain? How do we strengthen it? How do we get this one octopus to reach out and touch this other one and to hold on tight? There are different answers to that question, but the main one is repetition. Repetition. So this is why if you meet someone and then you repeat their name a few times, John, you close your eyes, imagine what they look like. Okay, his name is John, da, 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 right? You repeat it a few times, or you see him every weekend, at church or at the country club or somewhere, repeatedly, the checker at Yokes, whatever it is, right? If you see this repeatedly, all of a sudden, this octopus is talking to this one enough, they're connecting enough, they decide to just reach out and hold on to each other pretty strong. There's more connection that gets made. You with me? Yeah. So that repetition strengthens the connection between nerves. But this is a key idea. Your cells are alive in your brain. They're always remodeling. You got to tell them what to do. It's like use it or lose it, right? If you don't use that name and that face that you met, boom, that little octopus is like, we got better things to do. We don't need to remember this guy's name. Boop, it reaches off and it's looking for something else to do. Okay. I'll use another example. If you learn a new word in a foreign language, it's the same idea, right? If you learn, let's say, Spanish, and you know that the word for Spanish for a door is puerta, right? Now you're like, okay, that thing, the way that looks, I have the concept of door over here, and now I got this new word puerta that I have to match to it. I have the English word door that matches up to what that looks like, right? We got that connection down pat since we were, 3 years old probably, all right? Bazillions of repetitions, we're good, all right? But now I got a new word I got to tie into this thing. Somebody told me that puerta, who's ever heard of that sound, whatever that is, right? But anyway, I guess it's a Spanish thing. All right, so now I got to know that puerta ties into that. You with me? So we got a new connection there. Same thing. If it's repeated, it gets strong. Those nerves will hold on to each other. They're connected, and you're going to start to remember that easily. But use it or lose it principle. If you don't use your Spanish, you're not practicing it, slowly that nerve kind of like retreats. It says, I got other things that I need to be remembering and doing. So it's remodeling and it's changing. Isn't it pretty wild? Isn't that kind of amazing? Yeah. Every day, somebody say every day. Every day, your brain is remodeling and changing, and it's looking to you to tell it what's important and what it needs to do. Right? Does it need to learn something new? Does it need to recall something? Right? Or are you just, vegging out watching tube and your brain's basically got nothing to do. It's like popping off little octopuses left and right. It's like, we're not doing anything, we're passive. In fact, you use less brain when you watch TV than when you're asleep. You know that? It's the absolute most passive thing you could possibly do in your life is watch TV. Your brain is less active even than when you're asleep. All right.
I heard people say in the past that's why they call it TV program.
It could be. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the connection between those nerves. I talked about it like a little octopus limb reaching out, right? And we got a connection point, right? When we look at the nerves, here's what it kind of looks like. Have you heard the word nerve ending? That's kind of what I'm talking about. This is a nerve ending. So here comes one little octopus sucker from one nerve. Here's the other one. We got a nerve ending. And then we have a little bit of communication, actually a lot of communication flowing back and forth between them. That's that connection point. Yeah, this nerve is talking to this one right here through little chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. Everybody say neurotransmitters. Great. So you've heard of neurotransmitters. They transmit signals between the nerves. They're talking to each other there. And these are things like dopamine. Have you heard of that? Serotonin. Okay. Norepinephrine. Okay. These things, these are neurotransmitters. It's one means of the cell communicating to this one and therefore staying connected, right? All right, you guys are with me? Awesome. This is kind of what it looks like on a big scale. Zoom in, you can see the neurotransmitters sending signals from one cell to the other. All right. Let's talk about how vulnerable your brain is. We mentioned it has a high energy demand, therefore it's very vulnerable. For example, lack of oxygen for 1 minute equals unconscious, right? Think about that. You can go without food for 30, 40 days, something like that. You could go without water for maybe a week, 2 weeks. You could go without sleep for maybe a week, 2 weeks. Did you know if you just lack sleep consistently, you will die? You can kill someone by keeping them up all night. It's actually psychological torture that has been used at times in warfare. Okay, they basically play loud music and do things and just don't allow the enemies to sleep. The first thing that happens is you go crazy, you become psychotic, you start hearing and seeing things that don't exist, and then your body will just shut down. If you do not allow someone to sleep for a long enough time, you'll kill them. Interesting concept. All right. But still, you can last without sleep. You got to hang in there for maybe a couple weeks, let's say. Oxygen, totally different. 1 minute, and you're unconscious, right? So this is like shows you, comparatively speaking, the need that brain has to create energy. Therefore, the need that brain has for oxygen on a continual basis to run that little electron system we talked about. It's very dependent. It's very vulnerable. If it didn't have enough oxygen for even 1 minute, you're unconscious. If you lack it for even 5 minutes, as you'll see here, you have irreversible brain damage. Right? Think about someone falling through the ice, some kid, right? If he's down and he's out for longer than 5 minutes, brain cells are dying, going offline, they don't come back. Okay? So that's how vulnerable your brain is. Again, think of the idea of sleep. If you're asleep, your brain still knows how to get enough oxygen by startling you awake, right? And sort of like saving itself, SOS signal. Okay? It knows how to keep the oxygen flowing. So, do you see the problem? We got a little bit of a problem here. We've got high energy needs in the brain, right? 200 billion cells talking to each other all the time, sending out little chemical signals, communicating, chattering, making new connections, making new friends, right? Therefore, you must have a high utilization of oxygen doing its job that we talked about earlier. Therefore, you end up, unfortunately, with a high degree of oxidative stress, right? You end up with a lot of free radicals that get formed because, again, that chemical recombination with the oxygen, the hydrogen isn't perfect. Sometimes we end up with little lonely electrons sitting out there, and they're going to start grabbing other structures to get stable. So if you have high energy, you're going to have high oxygen, but you're also therefore going to have a high degree of oxidative stress. So the brain arguably has the greatest oxidative stress anywhere in the body for this reason. Again, we think about oxidative stress. I showed the example of skin. So of course, we're all concerned. We like our appearance, of course, like, oh my gosh, right? I mean, I got to worry about, my oxidative stress because that could, cause some wrinkles and stuff. Yeah, that's true. But you know what? Your brain, the oxidative stress in your brain is hugely more than that and hugely more important for your health, right? Hugely more. It's got the highest degree of oxidative stress anywhere of your body. It's not your skin, it's not anything else, it's your brain, because that's where so much metabolism is going, so much chemistry. And there's one further problem, okay? Dun, 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 dun. Something called the blood-brain barrier. Raise your hand if you've heard of the blood-brain barrier. Okay, a little bit, all right. So this is interesting. You might think that let's say you eat something, okay? And it obviously gets digested, gets absorbed into your bloodstream. It's floating down your bloodstream, heading to your brain. You might think that it can just get offloaded out of circulation and easily float into your brain. Okay, it makes sense. Turns out it can't because of the blood-brain barrier. You have a very strong barrier between your circulation system and your brain. It's like the Great Wall of China, let's just say metaphorically, very strong, impregnable, okay, built to keep things out for the most part. And you can think, well, why is that? I mean, we have to get stuff to our brain, obviously. Why is there this barrier, right? On the protective side, there's a barrier there because imagine you went to that potluck, right? Imagine you went to that potluck, it's hot, it's in the middle of the summer, the potato salad's like, been sitting out a little long, maybe questionable, right? But, you take some, you eat that, now you're feeling queasy, or the hamburger was a little undercooked, it has a little E. coli in it or something, right? Now you're queasy. So now there's something toxic that got absorbed into your GI tract, got absorbed into your bloodstream. Now we have something toxic floating around through our body. Do we want it easily to just float up into our brain as well?
No.
Negative. So the blood-brain barrier is there to protect us. It is selective. It's trying to keep things out that are potentially harmful to the brain while letting things in that are necessary, right? Obviously, things are necessary. If we, for example, eat something and we turn it into blood sugar, our brain runs on blood sugar. So that's why if you get too low on your blood sugar, aka hypoglycemic, you kind of feel out of it mentally, right? There's a lot of symptoms that could happen. Dizzy and feeling queasy and just strange, right? It's because your blood sugar got low. So anyways, as an example, we want blood sugar to freely be able to float out of circulation into the brain, but not the E. coli from the nasty, picnic, right? So we're going to be selective. So this blood-brain barrier is selective. That's partly a good thing, as I said, but it's also partly a difficult thing because there are things that we'd like to just easily get into the brain that are helpful. Sometimes it can't get there. Now, this is a picture of a diagram here, kind of the blood-brain barrier. This is a little bit of a different view. This is an end-on view. So your blood vessel is coming straight out like this at you. Okay, you're looking straight down that tube like this. And if you do that, you can see we got the blood in here, and then we have a pretty tight barrier before we get into these brain cells kind of on the edge. All right. We have a so-called tight junction right here. You don't have to remember that, but the point is this is locked down pretty tight. Very selective. All right. So here's the bazillion-dollar question. What if we could get antioxidants across the blood-brain barrier? Right? The brain has the highest need for energy, therefore the highest utilization of oxygen, therefore the greatest oxidative stress, therefore the greatest need for antioxidants, but yet we got the blood-brain barrier. So if I told you, hey, you know what? I'm going to tell you an antioxidant that can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. That should be exciting news to you, right? From a health and wellness viewpoint. If I can tell you there's an antioxidant, if you take it right now, that thing is crossing into your brain 20 minutes from now, and it's protecting all your nerves from oxidative stress and damage. It's protecting all the DNA and all the cell membranes from getting torn up from the free radicals. That's pretty exciting. Not all antioxidants can cross the blood-brain barrier, but certain ones can. So what if we could do that? We can. Okay, we can do that. Pretty cool. Vitamin C, as an example. Antioxidant also crosses the blood-brain barrier. Voila. Simple, cheap, easy. I mean, you can buy it for pennies on the dollar, essentially, at Walmart right now. That's phenomenal. I take vitamin C every day. I don't fail. It's got so many health benefits. It's not even funny. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got the best.
Cool. Yeah, love it. NAC. That's that little guy we talked about, kind of earlier on. NAC is a great supplement. I take some every day. It can go in, it can cross the blood-brain barrier, and then it turns into glutathione and perks up those glutathione levels, which is, again, one of your top 2 most important antioxidants. NAC, not expensive. You can ask me where to get it online for a good brand if you want. So that can cross the blood-brain barrier. That's phenomenal. Let me tell you another one. Something called alpha lipoic acid. You may or may not have heard of that. A lot of people haven't. You can look it up. It's a very potent antioxidant. Crosses the blood-brain barrier. Amazing. I take some every day. I don't fail. I take all these things, by the way, that I just mentioned.
Yeah, fish oil.
Every day. I don't fail. Fish oil can cross into the brain as well. And it does have antioxidant function. Yes. So this is not an exhaustive list. This isn't all of them. I'm just, giving you a couple heavy hitters to think about. and molecular hydrogen, by the way, can cross into the blood-brain barrier and function as an antioxidant. Therefore, we should get excited about that. Yeah. Yeah. If you remember going back to a few slides when I showed you that molecular hydrogen article, it said this thing is therapeutic, and it started listing off all these tissues, and it said central nervous system, right? Your central nervous system is medical phrase for your brain and your spinal cord together. So the molecular hydrogen can effectively cross into the brain and the spinal cord and act as an antioxidant. That's phenomenal news, right? What if we don't? What if we don't take care of our brain that way? We're eating no brightly colored fruits and vegetables, no vitamin C, no NAC, no alpha lipoic, no fish oil, no molecular hydrogen. We're just kind of just doing our life, and no great nutrition, nothing like that. What might happen to our brain? Well, nothing positive, as you can imagine. But most people don't quite, again, understand how serious that could be potentially. So I want to put a little exclamation point on that. So oxidative stress plays a role in causing Parkinson's. We know this. All the neurologists know this. Oxidative stress, if it builds up over time in your brain, those free radicals going around destroying things, ultimately ends up in a clinical syndrome of Parkinson's. Alzheimer's also. Okay. Oxidative stress over time tears things up, things die. Alzheimer's. Depression. That's interesting. That's a mood thing, right? It's like, well, that's a mood disorder, Yeah, it is a mood disorder, but again, these neurotransmitters in your brain, they carry signals that have to do with mood as well, right? Think about like hormones, right? Your hormones kind of change your mood, right? They can change it kind of up and down, for men as well as women. If a guy's testosterone gets too low, he's like depressed, listless, got no drive. His testosterone's up, he feels like a champ. Okay, mentally, hormones will affect you. Well, in the same way, mentally, neurotransmitters will affect you quite a lot. Well, mentally, the actual function and health of the nerves in your brain can cause, psychological trouble if they're not dialed in right. So oxidative stress actually has a role in depression. This is interesting. This kind of gets into the mind-body connection, right? This isn't my main point, but it's just fascinating. Think about it for a second. You can be depressed for purely psychological reasons, like your girlfriend broke up with you last week, right? Or your boss put you on probation, right? Fair enough. But you can also be depressed for more physiologic reasons, like you got oxidative stress that's unchecked in your brain and you aren't eating healthy, you're not taking antioxidants, as an example, right? Or you're smoking, which is a big oxidative stress on your body. Okay. Schizophrenia. Very striking, right? Again, most of us think of schizophrenia. We're like, yeah, we know that's genetic, kind of runs in families. Oh boy, well, we know that oxidative stress plays a role in causing this. Yep. Right. Let's look at a normal brain and look at an Alzheimer's brain. Pretty obvious to see the difference. What? All right. The Alzheimer's brain is essentially shrunken down. There's been atrophy, is the word that we would use. Volume loss. Mm-hmm. Think about all those octopus, those nerves that are reaching out and touching other nerves and holding on. All those little connections start to pop off and just wither and die away. And so things are shrinking. And so this is why someone who has Alzheimer's, all of a sudden you show up and they can't remember your name, because your face and your name, that little connection that was there for 10, 20, 30 years, this cell is dying off, it popped off, and these cells aren't talking to each other anymore, so they don't remember your name. They don't remember where they put their keys, right? They don't remember simple things because parts of the brain are now disconnecting, shriveling down, and they're not talking to each other anymore. That is Alzheimer's. All right, so we basically have wrapped it up. I'll take questions in a second. But just to say, if you care to learn more, this is my website, michaelturnermd.com, the future of medicine. In particular, I have a whole page there called Brain Health. You can see this right off of my homepage. You might be interested in this. Basically, this was the idea of, what if you came into my office and I spent 30 or 45 minutes talking with you about how to have a healthy brain? And I did that again next week. And I did that again next week and next week. And I went through like 10, key ideas for you to have a happy, healthy, optimal brain function. That's what I did. And so you get an email And then the email has questions, it has little video clips, it has articles to read, it sends you to YouTube to watch certain videos, and we roll out one topic at a time. We talk about oxidative stress, we talk about circulation, we talk about neurotransmitters, all this stuff. Okay. And I did that partly because I love to teach, but also because it's such a relevant topic. And I would have so many patients come to me and say, oh man, so-and-so had Alzheimer's in my family, I'm kind of concerned about that, or I feel like I'm forgetting things, or I had a concussion, or I had COVID and I had brain fog, all these reasons why people are concerned about the brain. And I was saying the same thing over and over again, but also not having time enough to really get into it like I wanted to. So I basically created this curriculum that you can check out if you're interested.
What was your website again?
You can go back. It's michaelturnermd.com. All one word. Yeah. All lowercase. Yeah, I have a couple cards I can give you. All right. So any questions then? Yes. I'm local here, yes. Yeah, so I've been in Tri-City since 2009. I was recruited to work at Catholic in their neuroscience center, if you've heard of the Catholic Neuroscience Center. So I worked there from 2009 to 2020, and then I went into business for myself. No bad blood, I like the neuroscience center, they're great. It was a fantastic experience. It's just that I wanted to take my career in more of an integrative medicine perspective, and I basically outgrew the role that they hired me for, right? So I was doing other things like checking hormone levels and talking about antioxidants and stuff that wasn't pure neuroscience. So I just said, I'm going to go in business for myself. So that's what I did. I work remotely for the most part. So Zoom or phone calls, that's most of it, because I actually work with people all over the country. But in terms of in person, I'm in person Friday afternoons for local people. Sit down in person, talk about that. Any questions? Further questions, please.
I don't know the guy's name, but not long ago, the football player fell on, he passed out, and then supposedly had 8 or 9 minutes of no oxygen to the brain, but now is walking around flying. Is that even possible? I can't remember his name.
DeMar Hamlin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Well, so a couple things. So you can be knocked out, unconscious, but still getting oxygen.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm just going theoretically, right? So someone's knocked on the field, they look like they're not moving, but they're still breathing slightly. Their chest is still kind of doing this, and they're still getting oxygen. That's one answer. The other answer is you can go without oxygen for a period of time, and brain damage will start to set in. Problems will happen. But your brain does have a capacity to renew to a certain degree, right? Again, think of a stroke, right? Certain brain cells die in a stroke, but can people rehab from a stroke? Yes, sometimes not 100%, but they can start to come back. So he might have had brain damage that was still reversible, right? With a couple weeks, physical therapy, good nutrition, this or that, right?
8 minutes. I thought he was
Yeah.
no.
So that typically would. So that also depends on how in shape you are, okay? Because if you're in shape, you can get by on less oxygen. Think about it like holding your breath, right? Think about it like some skin diver who's doesn't use a scuba, and this is his job in life. He's got to go down and get the clams and bring them back up and feed his family, right? That guy's going to be in shape because he's getting by on one sip of air and he's making it work, and he's diving down 40 feet and coming back, right? So if you're in shape, you can get by on less oxygen. You could go for longer than the average person. Also a concept that might have played.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well,
This is
the
perfect.
Older women, I forget what country, did they go dive on a stage?
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
I think he was there to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. It's striking. Yeah. Yeah.
They train their lungs or something.
Get trained. Yeah.
They go-
So speaking of that, just to talk about it for a second, it's a good point. So let's say that you're going to go get in shape, right? Let's say you're doing some cardio, you're running, you're doing step aerobics, Zumba, whatever it is, and you're in shape. Let's talk about what does it actually mean to be in shape? What does that mean, right? At a cellular level, if we zoom in on your body, what's actually going on? Your brain, you know that you're in shape, but what's going on inside your body that actually makes you in shape, right? So things that are obvious, you're thinking, my heart's stronger. That's true. Your heart's stronger, it's pumping better. You're thinking my lungs are stronger, they inflate more, they can suck in more oxygen and squeeze out more carbon dioxide. My lungs can work well. That's right. Heart and lungs, absolutely. That's part of being in shape. But here's a third part most people don't understand. Your mitochondria. Those areas inside your cell we talked about, 1,000 to 2,500 of those things have to be in shape. When you're in shape, if you look at your cell, what happens is they start growing more mitochondria. So a sedentary person, if I did a biopsy of your calf muscle cell, again, you're not really doing anything, you're sitting around and watching a lot of tube. Let's say you have 1,000 mitochondria in there. Person who's out exercising, jogging a couple miles every day, doing elliptical, walking their dog, whatever. I biopsy your calf muscle cell, you got 2,500. Let's say you're at that upper end. So you more than doubled it. You with me? So part of being shaped actually means that your cell starts sprouting and growing new mitochondria, doubling them, maybe tripling them, which is cool. And furthermore, each mitochondrion starts functioning more efficiently, right? Each bonfire starts burning at a higher rate, putting out more energy, burning up more carb, burning up more fat. It functions more efficiently. So you get more mitochondria and more efficient mitochondria when you are in shape. Okay? It actually creates some changes down there in the cell. Kind of pretty cool. All right. Any other questions? Lovely. Well, I enjoyed this very much. I hope you did too. I hope you learned some good things. I'll stay after. We can talk a little further. Happy to do that. Thank you, Kylie, for introducing me, and Amanda for having me today.
There's one more question on
Okay.
the live stream that I did see here.
Oh.
Can you share what are the causes of autism?
Can I share what are the causes of autism? Wow. It's first of all, we don't totally understand. We're still investigating it, and likely there are many causes that work together, kind of like cancer, right? Cancer is not just one thing. There are a lot of causes. So I don't want to. I'm not an expert enough to really say what are, let's say, the top 3 most cutting edge ideas around autism. I don't know. But we know it's complicated. There's a lot of things that come together. We know that incidence of it is rising, unfortunately. So we need to try to figure it out and get a handle on it. Okay. Really? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. That's stuff. Go ahead. No, you.
On the vitamin C and all that.
Yeah.
How many milligrams?
Great. So just for general health and wellness, 500 of vitamin C twice a day is great.
Yeah.
Twice a day, right. 500 is about the most you can absorb, kind of at once. Otherwise, you're just getting waste of it in your urine. Your cells can't take it up too much. So 500 is about the most at one point in time. If you are just generally living life, okay. If you are exercising hard, that's different. If you're sick, that's different. Your vitamin D will go up. If you're in the hospital, absolutely, your vitamin C will shoot through the roof. Okay, but just living your regular life, 500 milligrams twice a day will get you, what you need. You can go one more slide.
And then, my baby doctor was saying that you can vitamin D.
Sure. So there's a question about rejuvenating your bones and calcium and vitamin D. Yes. So to have good bone health, you need a bunch of things coming together. Your vitamin D level, very important. Calcium and magnesium, very important. You need certain trace minerals in there too. Okay, like boron and manganese and some trace minerals. And also, interestingly enough, you need protein. Bones have protein as a main component of them. We don't often understand. We think it's just muscles. No, it's bones as well. If your protein is low in your diet, your bones will get weak. And yeah, sure. But also, you need weight-bearing exercise. That is important, right? You need weight-bearing exercise. When you put weight through your bones, they remodel, they get stronger. Again, no different than a muscle would. If we're doing nothing, the bone just doesn't have a job to do, right? And it just kind of starts to wither. Think about the astronauts who go into space, right? It's a big problem. There's no gravity, so their muscles don't have a job to do. Their muscles start to atrophy. Their bones don't have a job to do. They get weak bones, right? So and in fact, most of the astronauts, at least initially, I don't know if this has changed, but when they come back and they pull them off, they have to carry them back off the space shuttle. I don't know if you've seen this. They can't walk, right? They're escorted like they're, like this, barely on their feet. You have to carry them off. Yes. Because the body starts to down cycle so much, with no emphasis of gravity. So think about that. If you're living a very sedentary life, you're sort of halfway in the astronaut world where things are just getting weak and, shriveling down. And so your bones need that stimulation of weight-bearing exercise. That's the idea. That is lifting weights, for example, or, something upright, weight-bearing, a little step aerobics class, Zumba, at least walking, jogging, something like that. Sitting on a stationary bike, that's not weight-bearing. Okay, swimming, it's awesome, but it's not weight-bearing either. So for bones, we need some weight bearing exercise.
Doctor, how about collagen? They have a big thing. Collagen.
Collagen is a question about collagen. It's helpful. I would say that collagen is a bit more marketing and hype than true medical value. Let's just say it's helpful, but it's kind of a fad right now that's gotten cranked up this high. It really doesn't need to be that high. So I don't take collagen, for example. I think generally it's just overpriced. You got a little thing of it and you pay, all this money. It's not really there. But if you want to, be at that, very aggressive level, let's say, of health and wellness, it's good for the skin. It is a source of protein that can help with bones.
And bone strength.
Yeah, to a degree. Great. Let me end the formal presentation right now then for people online. We can stop and I'll stay around and talk a little bit further with you. Okay. Sure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Turner. We really appreciate you. We'll have you back very soon again. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.